Publius Virgilius Marin, often nicknamed Virgil, was an ancient Roman poet. His poems have always been read and considered most praiseworthy, linking the founding of Roman culture to the Trojan War, describing one of the most tragic romances ever written, explaining the fundamental source of Roman conflict with Carthage. In this video, you may learn details about one of the books in Virgil's eternal renown epic, the Aeneid. Second book, Aeneas describes the fall of Troy. This book begins exactly where and when the prior ended. Aeneas is preparing to tell Dido, the queen, and the court of Carthage all about the fall of his city, Troy. Prior to entering a description of the Trojan War, Aeneas says,
"All that I saw and part of which I was, not even the hardest of our foes could hear, nor stern Ulysses tell without a tear. I will restrain my tears and briefly tell what in our last and fatal night befell."
He explains, the Greeks hid behind a small island near the Trojan shoreline. Those in the city came out to find the large wooden horse. The first to say that it should be brought into the city was a certain Aeneas. Yet, a priest named Laocoön warns against it. He is quoted as saying,
"Think you the foes have left your coasts? And are Ulysses' art not better known? This hollow fabric either must enclose within its blind recess secret tests, surely some design, by fraud or force. Trust not their presence, nor admit the horse."
Uncertain as to what to do, a captive is questioned. This one had intentionally allowed himself to be captured exactly for the purpose of fooling the Trojans. Describing his words, Aeneas first says,
"Hear how well the Greeks their wiles disguised. Behold how a single person encapsulates a nation." He stared and rolled his haggard eyes around, then said,
"Alas, what earth remains, what sea is open to receive unhappy me? Despised among foes, abandoned without allies."
Subsequently, this captive describes his alleged past. He says that his name is Polymedes and that he is a victim of Ulysses. Somehow, it is not clear to me, the Ithacan hero slandered and killed his father. He explains that the war had been too arduous for the Greeks. They
resolved to raise the siege and to return. And, had the gods permitted, they had gone. But ever the wintry seas and southern winds impeded their sails from aiming home.
Since they were stuck, a Grecian prophet divined that since they had killed an innocent virgin, Iphigenia, to gain favorable wind for the voyage to Troy, now they had to likewise kill a Greek to gain passage back to Greece. Ulysses, allegedly, proposed Polymedes for the sacrifice, which is why he fled to Troy and willingly made himself a captive. These lies are convincing. They unbind him, and he continues explaining that Athena abandoned the Greeks because of how Ulysses and Diomed sacked her temple. Another seer, Calchas, proposed leaving the wooden horse as a gift. In that manner, they will be able to sail back and later, perhaps, return. The captive emphasizes that,
"If your profane hands violate the gift, Minerva will ensure your town burns."
what is even more convincing is that a pair of giant, monstrous sea snakes appear. These devour Laocoön, the priest who argued against accepting the horse, and then the snakes move to rest at the feet of a statue of Athena. Surely, the message of this element in the story must be, if the gods do not favor you, there is no hope of avoiding doom. The poet sings,
Amazement seizes all, the people outcry. Proclaims Laocoön justly doomed to die, whose hand the will of Pallas had withstood, and dared to violate the sacred wood.
The town not only pulls the large offering into the city, but begins celebrating their triumph. I found curious that the only mention of the cursed lover of Apollo was,
Cassandra cried, and cursed the unhappy hour, foretold our fate. But by the gods' decree, all heard, but none chose to believe.
She will be mentioned again during the ensuing battle. After the celebration and much drinking, Aeneas speaks of himself when he says,
"Was in the dead of night when sleep repairs, our bodies worn with toils, our minds with cares, when Hector's ghost before my sight appears. A bloody shroud he seemed, and bathed in tears."
The fallen prince warns Aeneas of what is occurring, of how men hidden inside the horse are now rampaging through the streets and opening the city's gate. The spirit advises Aeneas not to attempt saving the city. It tells him to attempt saving himself. Yet, the hero does not flee. Rather, he sets out to wake other soldiers and find weapons. Of the heroes he encounters, perhaps the worthiest of mention is a certain Charybdis. He was Cassandra's groom, and he becomes the party's leader. Much occurs, I will not describe all. It seems that they started outside the city. They make their way to the Grecian ships and take some of their weapons. Because of their attire, they are at times confused as enemies by the population. Once inside the city, they find Cassandra is being taken. Charybdis fights for her and many die in the ensuing battle. Aeneas is quick to indicate that he survives not because of lack of honor or cowardice.
"Witness, ye heavens, I live not by my fault. I strove to have deserved the death I sought."
He goes as far as the city's palace, aiming to rescue Priam, the king. With the aid of new warriors, they kill many of those trying to loot the royal house. Herein enters Achilles. He is described as a monstrous human. Wielding an axe, he breaks through their barricades. Of Priam, Aeneas describes him as
"Loaded, not armed, he creeps along with pain, despairing of success, ambitious to be slain."
The queen, Hecuba, calls to him begging him to hide or flee rather than seek death. She says to him as he picks up a weapon,
"These times want other aids. Were Hector here, even Hector now in vain, like Priam, would appear."
The Prince of Phthia then kills Priam's son before the sight of his parents. The king cries out lamenting his son's death, and the invincible warrior responds by pushing a spear through the king's heart. I must quote,
"He, who the scepter of all Asia swayed, whom monarchs like domestic slaves obeyed. On the bleak shore he now rests abandoned, a headless carcass and a nameless corpse."
I cannot avoid opining that this notion is what made Scipio the Elder cry as he stood beside burning Carthage. The message of the whole myth, whether Iliad or this epic poem, is not so much justifying or glorifying vainglory and the pursuit of power. Rather, they decry as they viscerally indicate the meaninglessness of all such searches. Even such a once powerful king meets a bloody end. Aeneas describes his horror and fear at seeing the death of his king. He now finds himself alone in the palace. All his allies are gone. He catches sight of Helen, Menelaus's wife and Paris' lover, and he says,
"That common bane of Greece and Troy I found. Trembling with rage, the strumpet I consider, resolved to give her guilt the due reward."
He continues by questioning whether it would indeed be moral or just to kill a defenseless woman.
"Shall she her kingdom and her friends review, in state attended with a captive crew, while unrevenged the good old Priam falls, and Grecian fires consume the Trojan walls?"
Before acting, however, the recently deceased spirit of his mother appears before him. She tells him that this murder would be fruitless. Instead, he must now flee with the aim of protecting his own child, wife, and father. She tells him not to hate Helen or Paris. Divinity is responsible for Troy's ruin. When he returns home, he finds his family. His son, as mentioned in the first book, is called Ascanius or Iulus. His father is named Anchises, and his wife is named Creusa. His father, distraught by the death of his wife, is bent on finding death himself. As the older man leaves to fight the Greeks, Aeneas feels obliged to follow. It is quite heart-wrenching as Creusa begs the men to stay and survive. Then, a most peculiar thing occurs. Aeneas says,
Strange to relate, from young Iulus' head a lambent flame arose, which gently spread around his brows and on his temples fed.
As they wonder about the meaning of this surely divine sign, Anchises deduces that it must mean that it is imperative that the child lives. A lightning bolt is seen streaking across the sky, and they conclude that it shows them, as if it were an arrow, the path they must take in their flight. I must note that the image is not far from the later Christian invention of the divine halos carried by the saints and favorites. Jocularly, the grandfather's mentality completely changes. He now says,
"Keep, O my country gods, our dwelling place, and guard this relic of the Trojan race. This tender child. These omens are your own, and you can yet restore the ruined town."
Aeneas quickly packs all that he can. He gathers various bystanders and servants to join them in the journey. I must deduce that they are currently not within the city, but it isn't clear. Either way, he tells all that they are heading towards an old, ruined temple of Demeter. Alas, in the journey, Creusa, Aeneas' wife, somehow is left behind. She gets lost, and when they arrive at their destination, Aeneas expresses his loss as he says,
"This was the fatal blow that pained me more, that all I felt from ruined Troy before."
Therefore, he returns from whence they came. When he arrives at his house, it lies in ruins, burning. He continues his search and returns to the palace. He calls Creusa's name, but only her spirit appears. Yes, his wife has been killed. She tells him that
nor tears, nor cries can give the dead relief. Desist, my beloved, don't indulge your pain. You bear no more than what the gods ordain.
What is more, she has him take counsel in knowing that she will not be a slave to any proud Grecian dame or lustful lord. He tries to hug her spirit, but she vanishes as he reaches for her. When he returns to where he had left his son and father, he finds that more refugees have gathered. They give him command, and he instructs them to first rest and later build a fleet to carry them away. Of course, in the next book their journey begins. We already know that later they crash in Carthage, where they meet Dido, the queen, but their journey to Carthage, which is merely a temporary stop, is nearly as perilous and filled with wonder as the Odyssey. Now, to pique your curiosity, to motivate you to watch the last video of the series, I gift you a teaser sample of the many aphorisms I crafted as I read this author.
Although great suffering justifies foregoing your duty to the world, the pain should only strengthen the duty to yourself.
If you enjoy or gain from my aphorisms, know that I have thousands. I will be writing books with short thematic essays composed out of aphorisms. These essays are profound and intriguing yet easy to read. For very cheap copies, look up Protagoras Pause in the Amazon website. I repeat, Protagoras Pause, that's my name.